Hello and welcome to another episode of Father and Joe. I'm Joe Rockey here with Father Boniface Hicks. And Father, I'm working on something for a speech I'm going to be presenting here. And a thought at the core of this is about relationship building. In this case, is in the aspect of sales, but still, the core of it still is relationship building. And obviously, we talk about relationships a whole lot here on Father and Joe. As when people ask me about this show, I believe it's about the relationship you have with yourself, the relationship you share with others, all underneath the umbrella of the relationship you have with God. So relationships are obviously pretty pivotal to that. And I was hitting this from the reverse angle of how do you ruin a relationship? And I had this whole big, massive list of words written in front of me. And they're all negative things that you don't want to have about yourself. And it all kind of occurred to me, they all fit underneath this general collection of some form of selfishness, self-centeredness, something like that as being the antithesis of building a relationship. And where my thought came into play was, well, if self-centeredness is a strong root to the problem of destroying relationships, what could the inverse be? And I came up with a couple of answers, but the one that seemed to be the strongest of them was curiosity. Because to me, if you were curious, by definition, you can't be selfish because you're learning about something else, something beyond yourself. And I kind of wanted to tease out that thought because curiosity is a thing that our phones don't really teach us that much when every algorithm is designed to make you happy and to be tailor-made to you. And aside from wanting to find out for selfish reasons whether that is an accurate way of looking at it, I wanted to dive into it because I think the stimulation of curiosity, especially in others in the building of relationships, might be one of these. Of course, you should know it, but if you actually practice it, cheat codes of modern life. So I wanted to bring that up and kind of introduce this idea for our audience here with Father and Joe.
Yeah, I think it's a great starting point. Curiosity is maybe a funny word, and I'll just make a couple of distinctions for the sake of getting the right angle on curiosity. The angle that you have, and as you described it, I totally agree with that. When we approach a person with that kind of, let's call it healthy and holy curiosity, and that would be a genuine interest to learn and discover from the other. And so that's a beautiful attitude to have. It's what we discover when we talk about transformational conversation. That's based on the work of Judith Glaser, who studied the dynamics of different kinds of conversations. And transformational conversation has the dynamic of share and discover. That requires a fair amount of trust. And that's one of the ways that we can start to see what could become unhealthy in curiosity if there isn't a proper respect and fostering of trust between people. But I think in the Pittsburgh area, I could say the wrong approach to curiosity would be when you're being Nebby. So Nebby and curious are different. And
yes, they are.
Or nosy for those who are not from Pittsburgh. Being nosy and putting your nose in business that's not yours, and that's trying to extract information for purposes that are also perhaps not very pure. That would be St. Bernard describes the 12 steps of pride, and he puts curiosity, and he would say nebbiness if he grew up in Pittsburgh. He would say nebbiness is the first step of pride. It's arrogating to oneself the feeling that I ought to know about everything. and that's a different thing than curiosity that you're describing. The curiosity in the way you're describing is the same word that would be used in a lot of more modern approaches to counseling, things like internal family systems. They talk about the 8 C's of being in self: compassion, connectedness, confidence, courage, calm, and curiosity is one of those, where I'm approaching myself that way, rather than saying, well, I could condemn my nebbiness. I don't know if I have a nebby part. I probably do. But anyway, I might notice that I'm being nebby, and then I'm so terrible. Why am I always so terrible? I need to stop sticking my nose in you can hear the contempt in that. I'm hating this part of me, rather than saying, why is that coming out in this circumstance? That's interesting. That's a curious approach to what's happening in myself. And we could add kindness to that. When we take curiosity and kindness towards ourselves and towards others, that fosters an openness which builds trust and forms communion. And that is certainly the way that we build up relationships. So to circle back to what I had said a little bit earlier, having a sense of the appropriate level of trust for the kinds of questions that I'm asking. If I start asking you some really inappropriate questions about your private life, especially here on the podcast in front of a lot of listeners that we don't know and don't have any reason to trust, with intimate details about our lives, that's really inappropriate. I might be curious, but that's not an appropriate expression of curiosity. On the other hand, if I were to say, with genuine interest, I'd love to know more about your family life, or your relationship with your wife, and then I'm leaving that very open-ended for you to share what's appropriate. And then when you tell me, I don't sort of take over the conversation, go, oh, let me tell you about my life. I keep the focus on you, and I say, well, that's really interesting. How did it happen? How did you meet Teresa, and how did you get closer to each other? And how's life progressing? And a genuine interest that shows me that helps you feel that you're worth knowing by my interest, that what you have to share is worth hearing, and that you have something to teach me that I can only learn from you. All of that ascribes a value to you that is something you can really feel and own and start to live out of. It gives you confidence and calm, and can help to really build you up as it builds up our relationship, because then you feel like, oh, Father Boniface actually cares about me and wants to know me and is interested in me, and well, I must be worth knowing. And so that kind of healthy curiosity with a proper respect for trust, not treading on or extracting information that's not mine to know, but that kind of approach to a person is a beautiful way to build up relationships, to build up communion.
And you just outlined some of the positives that come out of using curiosity correctly. And from hearing what you were saying there, in terms of the difference between curiosity and nebbiness, I effectively am drawing, I'll say the longer way of saying this and say the short way thereafter. The first way is, when you're curious, you genuinely care about the other person. You want to see a mutual, growth in some capacity. It's not just me trying to get something out of you. And the backdrop of that is the word vulnerability. When you are mutually going down a road of trust, you're not asking someone, as you said it very well, you're not asking personal questions from an audience that shouldn't hear it, because that would be a violation of trust and put you both out into vulnerabilities. And if you're equally reciprocating, as curiosity tends to be, you are then naturally instilling at the same point of vulnerability and acceptance. When you're nebbing, there's none of you on the line. It's just, hey, I want to know everything about you, and you get to know nothing about me. This is one-way glass, or however that expression is. The one where you can see through, but they can't see you.
One-way mirror.
And yeah, that's right. And the reality is that that lack of vulnerability is how you put up walls between yourself and other people. And I think that skill set of truly learning and mastering the art of being vulnerable and when and how, plus a healthy curiosity in what's going on, I think is a magical ingredient that feels like it is the antithesis of what these algorithms in the phones are pushing us upon as the expected norm of society. And if you can embrace this curiosity and willing to be vulnerable, what I believe it does, to directly correlate this to Jesus, as Father and Joe typically tends to do, is be what Jesus says, which is don't be hard of heart. Like obviously you can't make your heart stone. We're not Medusa or something like that. But the way that I have interpreted what he's saying is someone who has hardness of heart is in a state of, I got this, in a state of pride, a state of selfishness, and just doesn't want to hear or explore a different way. Said another way, they don't want to be curious about learning something different. And that was, to me, one of the things that kind of gave me an indicator I might be right along this road, as far as curiosity might be a way that we should live our lives with a healthy dose of vulnerability. But I want to check before I make that leap to see if that is part of the teachings or if I was just happy in speech writing and I tried to commend something into there that didn't really supposed to be in there.
Yeah, I think you're right that vulnerability is the sine qua non for intimacy and communion in relationships. We just don't get there without it. And so any healthy dynamic in a relationship is going to have some dimension of vulnerability. And unhealthy dynamics are going to be more walls, more guarded. Now, again, there are times to have walls and be guarded when there's a reason
Yeah.
to not trust. And so I don't want to make one good and the other bad, but in terms of building relationships, that happens through vulnerability, which is made possible through trust. And we want to be measured about that and not just spill all the beans on the first encounter. On the other hand, we don't want to put up walls so thick that we never make any expressions of communion and trust and share ourselves in any way. And I think your insight about the difference between curiosity and nebbiness. Nebbiness has no vulnerability attached. I'm trying to niggle for certain details, to have something over on someone, or to just extract curiosities. I say that in a negative way now, like a curio shop that's just trying to collect gossip, basically. And that's something that makes me sort of more powerful than something that makes me vulnerable in receiving it. So we could ask, what is the vulnerability and curiosity? Well, if I were to say to you, I'd love to hear more about how you and Teresa met. And I'm actually open to whatever you tell me. And if you tell me, we were both doing headstands on the Allegheny River, and we happened to look into each other's eyes, and I'm asking you in a way that I trust you, and so I'm going to trust what you tell me. And that makes it possible for you to manipulate me or to lead me down a bad path if you want to, because that's what makes it a genuine openness to the other, is that I trust you to tell me the truth and to share something that's authentic with me. And so I'm letting down my guard in that way. And so it makes me vulnerable. Now, you didn't actually meet by standing on your heads together on the Allegheny, and you wouldn't tell
I
me
don't think I've
that.
ever stood on my head.
And that's good. And I recommend that you continue not standing on your head. But
Yeah.
the point is, if I really let down my guard and trust you to tell me things, then and answer my questions genuinely, then I'm opening myself to being misled, being lied to, being betrayed, being So that's where the vulnerability is, and that's where the real sincere um, interest is in your life. I'm trusting that you can share something with me that I can't find somewhere else, and so I'm really learning it from your experience, and it makes it possible. This is a little bit of a tangent, but I think it's not. I think it's fitting. Sometimes people will say, I think we've had this in an episode at some point. How are you, a celibate priest, in any way qualified to help me, a married man, with anything to do with something you don't have any experience of? Well, it's true. I have not been married and don't plan to be. But at the same time, I've known a lot of married people. And because I've opened myself genuinely to their experience and I've trusted them not to lead me astray, but to tell me the truth about what that experience is like, I have experienced a lot of marriage. In some ways, I've experienced more marriage than any particular married person because I've experienced a lot of different marriages. I haven't experienced it in the daily depth that any given married person has experienced it, but I've experienced a lot. And opening myself vulnerably to hear and learn from those who have the experience. And that's the way that psychologists can treat people with mental disorders that they themselves have never had. You don't have to have schizophrenia to treat someone who's schizophrenic. You don't have to have bipolar to treat somebody who's bipolar. You don't have to have major depressive disorder to treat somebody who's depressed. So, but we can really learn that from someone who can teach it to us. And that's, again, back to your point. How do you build relationships? How do you build trust? How do you deepen communion? Through a mutual vulnerability, through sharing increasingly intimate information as appropriate, and then kind of holding each other's hearts, as it were, forms us in a communion with others and really forms us. I'm really formed by those who share themselves with me. I really take it in. Sometimes I think of it as like, I make my heart like soft wax, and I allow you to make an impression on me, to press your life, your experience, what you want to share into my heart. And if you press bad things there, I suffer those things. But I trust you to press good things there, namely the goodness of your life. Even if those are hard things or suffering or struggles or difficulties, they're still fundamentally good because they're part of your life. And I make my heart receptive to that sharing.
Which gets into the natural reason why people stop being curious is, I could get hurt this way. And,
that's right.
The fear that comes up from there. And, just since this is going to be the conclusion of the episode, this will be the last I bring up this speech. It's going to be to a group of salespeople. And in the world of sales, it's one of the highest turnover industries there is. When you look at sales as its own independent industry. And part of the reason is people feel like they're using each other and all that. And my answer is because you're doing it wrong. You're being more Nebby to try to find out just about them so you can effectively use them to get your commission or your sale. Whereas if you do it correctly, genuinely care about the person you're going to serve with your product or service that will help them, it can change everything, and it does change everything. So that's the difference, is that being open and wanting to learn about them and sharing your own journey and failures and shortcomings along the way, but also having that, as you said, the right line of trustworthiness and know when you're getting lied to and calling it out. It's a big part of building this thing correctly. And, there's certain situations as human beings, we lie without even realizing we're lying. One of those situations is immediately as soon as a salesperson approaches you, whether it be a call on your phone from a number you don't know or a car dealer walking up to you on their used car lot. It is a secondhand nature, the way that we all are built within our brains. But how do you not go down that road of contempt, as you said in the beginning, and selfishness and using you and just learning tricks and gimmicks so I can overcome them without them knowing, but actually genuinely caring? And I appreciate sharing these thoughts with you because I never want to lead someone astray. I think that's one of the things that come across. Wouldn't be doing this podcast for 8 years if that was the ultimate end gotcha goal. We wouldn't be growing the way that we would if the audience thought that either. So with that being said, everyone, we do appreciate you listening to us here and being with us. If you haven't already, please leave a written review as well as the star review on whatever platform you are on. It makes a tremendous difference here as far as people finding us. And we greatly appreciate you being with us here today. And we'll be with you again next week.